Potentially one of the weirdest things to ever happen regarding Disney was when in January 2009, posters began to spring up all around the Disney studios, parks, and stores asking, "Are you 23?" With no more context than that, the date March 10th, 2009, and a URL. 2009 was an odd year for the Walt Disney Company. The 2000s up until that point had been disappointing for the studios as a whole, with the post-Renaissance era of films not performing critically or commercially as well as Disney had averaged in the 90s. Disney wanted to get back on track and re-establish themselves as the pop culture juggernaut that they had previously known themselves to be. 2009 was the year Disney acquired Marvel Studios, which was a huge financial success for the company. The year the revival era kicked off with Princess and the Frog. It was the year Up took home numerous Oscars, and importantly, 2009 was the year the D23, the official Disney fan club, launched. It was at the time called D23, the official community for Disney fans. Yes, in a bizarre marketing strategy, perhaps proposed by D23 marketing and publicity team member Jeffrey Epstein, the Are You 23 campaign turned out to be the lead up to the announcement of the D23 fan club being launched. In all seriousness though, Jeffrey seems like a lovely, hardworking gay man who wrote this iconic book. He should receive nothing but love, no hate to my king, Jeffrey R. Epstein. I'm sorry about your name, man. If you went to the website that was linked in small print on the posters and visual advertisements, you would be taken to a site where a little animated Tinkerbell would show up and wave her wand, and she would reveal a countdown to the March 10th reveal, which also happened to be the date of the 2009 Disney shareholders meeting. This marketing campaign legitimately went viral in Disney fan circles because no one could guess what it was for. A very popular theory on Disney discussion forums at the time was that it could be correlated to Pixar's 23rd anniversary, but no one was certain at all, and no one guessed this. Founded and headed by Stephen Clark, another gay D23 king, D23 was the official fan club for Disney fans of all ages, locations, and types. Bob Iger said that D23 was a way to celebrate the long history of the company.
We have a fantastic legacy that started in 1923 and is based on timeless stories, beloved characters, and unforgettable experiences. But it's our fans that keep the spirit of Disney alive year after year, generation after generation. D23 is our way of saying thank you and celebrating our fans who bring the magic of Disney to life every day in every corner of the world.
When D23 launched as a fan club, a large selling point at the time was the inclusion of the quarterly publication Disney 23. This was a magazine for Disney fans with a retail price of $15.95 an issue, which Google tells me adjusted for inflation is worth about $25 now. The magazine advertised segments such as A Walk with Walt, which was a look back at Walt Disney's work and his legacy, something called D-Society, which took readers backstage at red carpet events and just Walt Disney events, I guess. Walt Disney Archives photo libraries, vintage Disney comic strips, crafts for children of all ages, which I think is really cute, and segments that were exclusive to each individual issue. The charter membership of D23, the only membership tier that existed at the time of launch, cost $74.99 annually, and it included a yearly subscription to the publication, as well as a bi-weekly fan e-newsletter situation, a personalized certificate, a personalized membership card, and exclusive access to merch and opportunities, as well as an exclusive lithograph of Mickey from the Walt Disney Archives. Fan reactions to the announcements were divided online, with many superfans very, very excited at the new community and the backstage access it provided, but a good number of people also had criticism aimed specifically at the cost of the membership.
Fan outreach in recent years has consisted mostly of high-dollar merchandise events on the West Coast, where fans pay large sums to have the privilege of waiting in line to pay larger sums on limited edition trinkets. Now, we're in the midst of an economic crisis, and Disney shows up asking us to pony up $75 a year, with part of the benefit being access to new, more expensive merchandise and a discount on admission to an event that's open to the public anyway.
At the 2009 San Diego Comic-Con, Disney had a booth on the show floor promoting and building hype for something new called the D23 Expo, now known as the D23 Ultimate Fan Event, also founded by Stephen Clark. It was to take place that same year in September, and the booth had a display featuring props and costumes from various films to promote the upcoming expo, focusing on Disney robots in particular, seemingly. From September 10th to 13th, 2009, D23 Expo took over the Anaheim Convention Center for the very first time. time. Tickets were available to the public, with D23 fan club members receiving a discount of $21 on 4-day passes or a $7 discount on single-day passes. The Expo show floor featured exhibitions from Walt Disney Imagineering, exhibits from the Walt Disney Archives, a display from Disney consumer products, models and tests for new attractions, photo opportunities, as well as various arena presentations. Guests would get sneak peeks of upcoming films, as well as various announcements, letting them be the first in the world to know updates on Disney's projects at the time, including, during an animation panel, concept art for a new film titled The Snow Queen that Disney had begun work on. I wonder if anything ever came of that. Other notable announcements were the Fantasyland expansion at Walt Disney World, huge, and the Star Tours overhaul at both parks, as well as the title of the new Pirates of the Caribbean movie and the announcement of the new Muppets movie. I'm also eternally jealous because they got a live performance from the Muppets, which is something that I deserve to witness. The First Expo very much established the bones of what the convention has evolved into today, which is a showcase of all past and future Disney projects and a chance to flaunt to the shareholders as well as fans, and a place for fans to meet each other and spend money, albeit on a much smaller scale at the time, resembling a fan-run convention more so than a large corporate exposition. I also think it's very interesting that a lot of the scheduling, especially the panel, seemed far niche in content and more targeted to super fans than what the lineups of recent expos kind of include. Progress City USA recounts a panel on Don DeFore's Silver Banjo Barbecue, as well as 2 separate events detailing Walt's trip to South America in 1941 and the packaged films that resulted from it. The Parks and Resort Pavilion on the show floor was designed to resemble the original Disneyland TV specials, rather than the modern advertisements of the parks, and they had high-level Imagineers there to discuss the work with any public attendees that were interested. The expo was widely considered to be a success. Sure, there are a few kinks to work out, but most people came away happy, and people seemed happy at the company despite internal pressures.
When we started D23, and especially the expo, there were doubters. I'll never forget a senior finance guy sitting me down in a conference room at the studio and telling me in a deadpan tone, if you don't come in at or under budget, then it will be bad boy Stephen Clark, and we'll have to do something about that. I took that in for a moment, hoping he would crack a smile. He didn't. He was serious. No one had ever talked to me that way before, so the heat was on. I didn't want to be a bad boy. Well, I think Walt was smiling down on us because the first expo was a success. Lots of learning, things to improve and all, of course, but the fans came. It was fun, we made our numbers, and the rest is history.
It was clearly enough of a financial success for this to become a long-term investment and a long-term plan. In March of 2010, D23 did something unexpected and announced that the expo would be held every second year rather than annually, and would instead hold Destination D events in the off year. The first Destination D event, held in September of 2010, took place at Disneyland Resort across 2 days. The event held special presentations, panels, guest experiences, and seemingly exclusive merchandise, and notably there was a Mickey Mouse Club reunion and the very first Disney Legend celebration, which was a public tribute to those very, very special people who had such an impact on the Disney company that they were awarded Disney Legend status. Tickets were $125 per person, or $165 if you bundled your ticket with the D23 scavenger hunt, which was a day-long scavenger hunt held across all of Disneyland Resort, and if you were in the first 10 teams to complete the scavenger hunt, you were awarded Disney merchandise. The tickets were significantly more expensive than the D23 Expo tickets the previous year, with D23's 3-day pass being $111 for the general public, but presumably this is more to do with the park's admission cost itself, I would presume. This also felt like an event targeted to fans interested in niche topics and presentations, with my personal highlight of the lineup being the Weird Disney panel, which included a portion dedicated entirely to photos of Walt in silly hats. Destination D was a much smaller event than D23 Expo, with reportedly only 1,300 guests in attendance. In 2010, D23, the fan club, also introduced tiers to its membership. The Gold membership, which was the new title for the flagship membership tier, retailed at $74.99 again that year, and the Silver tier debuted at $34.99, which just did not include the print magazine in the membership. The second D23 Expo in 2011 saw a massive jump in both popularity and pricing. D23 member pricing for 3-day passes ranged from $85 to $115, with non-member pricing ranging from $106 to $136. And we have the inclusion of Premier and Sorcerer packages for the very first time. The Premier package includes a base 3-day admission, reserved seating for panels and showcases, access to an exclusive lounge with concierge and refreshments, as well as a special exhibit from the Walt Disney Archives, a D23 Expo autograph book, and a special Premier package gift bag. This retailed for $500 USD. I don't know if it included tax, but presumably not, and there were 250 tickets available in this tier. The Sorcerer package had a price jump on top of that of 500 USD, meaning that it retailed at 1,000 USD and had only 50 tickets available. It included everything in the Premier tier, as well as a private tour of the Walt Disney Archives, an exclusive hard hat tour of the show floor before opening, although I don't know really what the appeal of that is, limited edition artwork signed by a Disney artist, special shopping opportunities, a hardbound exclusive D23 Expo guidebook, and interestingly, a voucher for an appointment with an on-site massage therapist. For some reason, the 2011 Expo literally doubled in size from the inaugural convention and now included some Marvel news and sneak peeks after the Marvel acquisition was finalized in late 2009. Another thing that seemed to double in size with the 2011 Expo were the complaints. The event had clearly ballooned in popularity in the 2 years since the first, but Disney seemed ill-equipped to handle the expanded capacity. While there was much more room on the show floor, as well as things to do and ticketing seemed to be handled better, there were dozens, if not more, critiques about crowd management. Multiple hour lines to even get inside the convention, hours waiting in line to see presentations before being turned away at the last minute and not seeing the presentation, and supposedly having massively reduced capacity in the presentation halls, which I presume was to make sure that no one had an obstructed view, but I imagine people who had been waiting for hours would rather have an obstructed view than not get into the room at all. Progress City USA once again reports that there were far less scheduled events in 2011 compared to 2009, and almost none were occurring parallel to each other, which resulted in such long lines for everything. He writes that the longest he stood in line in 2009 was an hour, but 2011 had 3 to 4 hour averages for their lines. Reports from the 2009 Expo suggest that organizers worked very, very hard to accommodate for demand and be flexible to reduce time spent in line for guests. A flexibility that seems to diminish in subsequent years as the formal structure of the convention is solidified. It seemed that Disney had not yet fully realized the interest in their own event and hadn't prepared for the amount of people who had seen all the positive word of mouth from 2009 and made sure that they had to attend this year. A report by Disney Travel Babble speaks about a crowd control issue that she saw the Expo have during presentations and panels. So the first few rows of seats in the panels were reserved for Sorcerer guests, the $1,000 ticket holders, but Sorcerers weren't necessarily told a certain time to get to the panels by. So rather than telling the sorcerers that they had to arrive by a certain time and then filing in the general public, they would let the general public in first and send them to the middle and back of the room, and then with any empty sorcerer seats up the front, which inevitably there were a few at any panel, sometimes very, very, very many of them, they would then send people from the back of the line into the empty seats, meaning that those who had waited sometimes up to 8 hours would be seated behind people who got there last. Disney Travel Babble also suggests as a solution to crowd control issues, having presentations be replayed or broadcast live for people who cannot make it inside the theater, as well as the idea to reserve spaces and panels beforehand so that people aren't as disappointed when they aren't let inside at the last minute. 2012 had Destination D be held at Disneyland again, this time in Disneyland Hotel, with a tribute to 75 years of animated Disney features. Dick Van Dyke and Alan Menken performances were highlights, and this also seems to be the very first time Let It Go was shown to a wide audience ahead of Frozen's release the following year. You may not have heard of it, though, it's a pretty deep cut. This event, once again, was much smaller than the Expo and featured a much more specific schedule of panels traveling through the history of Walt Disney animation. Because of the much smaller size of the event, Destination D entirely took place in the Disneyland Hotel. A ticket guaranteed guests to seats at all of the panels, meaning there's no waiting in lines or having to work your schedule around what you wanted to see. Of course, there was no show floor, but this seemingly has allowed Destination D events to follow a coherent theme for each year and delve deep into that theme. And this format has persisted even to the present day, despite the ever-growing popularity and the moving the event to Walt Disney World that occurs. My co-researcher makes a note here that Destination D seems to be becoming the go-to event for adults who love Disney, with an air of understood maturity to the event, whereas D23 Expo is more so the go-to event for Disney adults TM. You say this with no shade, I'm literally wearing Mickey ears right now and a Tangled shirt, and we are both fulfilling decades-long dreams of attending our first D23 in a couple weeks. So genuinely, we are Disney adults. We don't say this, but then it showed. The expo already seems to be creeping towards a more explicitly corporate life, whereas Destination D seems to be more focused on catering to the hardcore Disney adult fans with deep cut panels and just very, very deep dives into the company's history. 2013 saw another expo during Bob Iger's reign. This was the first expo that included and featured Lucasfilm after the Disney acquisition in 2012, which opens up the expo to a whole new audience of attendees. There was the very first hint at the Star Wars franchise presence coming to the parks in the future with Project Orange Harvest displays in the Imagineering booth, which is a reference to Blue Harvest, a working title for Return of the Jedi, and one of my favorite bits on Caravan of Garbage. Go subscribe to Mr. Sunday Movies. In a What to Know article on Xanaland.com, Jeffrey R. Epstein spoke about how Disney was aware of the crowd control issues and worked very hard in 2013 to combat them. The Stage 23 venue doubled in size this year, with Stage 28 and the arena also increasing their capacities. I genuinely want to give Disney credit for their attempts at managing crowd control here. It's obviously an ever-present problem, and it is at any large convention, and they don't always handle it in the best way, but I cannot think of an effective way to manage the crowds when the event popularity just each year keeps ballooning and they want to maintain a good experience for attendees. They seem to listen to the complaints and always try their best to find new ways to lessen the problem, including live streaming the arena presentations for Expo attendees that weren't able to secure a seat inside. Another attempt to address these complaints from the previous years is the introduction of Stage Pass for the 2013 Expo, which was inspired by the park's Fast Pass queue management system. Guests who held a Stage Pass for a specific panel ensured that they'd have a seat for that presentation ahead of time rather than having to wait in line for hours for the chance of getting one. Each ticket holder was entitled to one Stage Pass per ticket for panels held in Stage 23 and Stage 28 during the 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. time frame, and then after that they could go back and get a second Stage Pass for sessions later in the day. Food at the convention apparently still sucks, which has been an ever-present complaint since the Expo's birth, but it's a convention. We have to be a little realistic with our expectations. It's illegal for cons to have good food. The first official costume contest was held this year, and apparently it was a mess. The MC was overheard saying he didn't know he was hosting until about noon that day. The show didn't have a director or a stage manager, and contestants were required to sit around for 2 hours doing nothing just to answer a 2-minute roll call. None of the contestants' audio or descriptive text was used, and judges were not given supporting materials required for the contestants to provide. So the hosts flubbed most names and didn't think to ask questions until about the last 10 or so contestants, and the judges just didn't know what they were looking at or how to judge it because of that. The judges also seemed to have very little Disney knowledge, and because of this, every category seemed to just award the most complex pieces, even though best craftsmanship was only one category and others were meant to incorporate creativity without necessarily having needed to spend the most hours on a piece. For example, like best original design, best adherence to theme, things like that. Tickets increased in price again this year, but not by much, except for the Sorcerer package, which jumped up to $1,500. This included early entry an hour before the general public to the con, an exclusive lounge, special lines and for shopping opportunities at the con, and the ability to reserve panels and showcase seats ahead of time with zero waiting in line required. Before the expo was held, the Saturday tickets sold out the first year that this happened. The very first international D23 was held in 2013, with the inaugural D23 Expo Japan taking place at Tokyo Disney Resort. While smaller than the Anaheim Expos, there were numerous exclusive first looks, namely of Shanghai Disneyland, presentations, and a concert by the Neverland Orchestra. There also seems to be a very large inclusion of Kingdom Hearts, far bigger than any inclusion I can find at any main D23 Expo. The popularity of the event in Japan was visible, and this suggested that international endeavors for D23 would continue to be successful if they did more. 2014 saw a new head of D23. After Stephen Clark stepped down in late 2013 to pursue new career opportunities outside of Disney, Adam Sanderson was named Senior Vice President of Corporate Communications in February 2014, taking on the role of both heading the fan club as well as overseeing the Walt Disney Archives. Although it wasn't at a D23 event, on October 28, 2014, Kevin Feige did his first slate of announcements at the El Capitan Theater in Hollywood, internally referred to as KevinCon. This signaled Marvel Marvel's ability to move some of their big announcements outside of SDCC. The fact that Kevin chose to announce all of the major developments coming up in the MCU, not only outside of Comic-Con, but at Disney's flagship movie house, symbolized how profitable it could be to keep these kinds of huge announcements inside the Disney company itself. This was also the first year that the primary Destination D event took place at Walt Disney World rather than Disneyland. There had been a smaller Destination D at Walt Disney World to celebrate its 40th anniversary in 2011, but that seems to have been more of an anniversary specific thing than a regular Destination D. The celebration was subtitled Attraction Rewind and centered around the Disney parks and celebrating its innovations. D23 changed the membership tiers again, eliminating the silver tier and creating a new gold family membership, which allowed gold members to pay an additional $25 USD in order to bring up to 3 guests to select D23 events. In 2015, Hall D, the largest space in the convention, became known as Hall D23. This set up to 7,500 people and became the major showcase space, D23's equivalent of Hall H. The D23 Expo app was also introduced this year. Its features included maps of the event space, full schedules of presentations and special experiences, real-time updates on stage pass availability, which I imagine was very helpful, and an AR feature that allowed users to virtually interact with locations around the expo. Additionally, there seemed to be some kind of trading card experience with card drops around the expo floor that were announced on the app. D23 has now established itself so much that Disney is able to announce all of their most exciting projects and news at the D23 Expo rather than the previously more publicized San Diego Comic-Con. This seems to mirror Disney's growing business move towards quote-unquote owning their audience's attention rather than having to delegate it to other entities. Disney's launching of Disney Plus as their bespoke streaming platform 4 years later to own their streaming profits and end their exclusive content deal with Netflix is another example of this trend. The most notable announcement from 2015's Expo was Bob Iger personally announcing Galaxy's Edge coming to both Disneyland Park and Walt Disney World Hollywood Studios. The cast of The Force Awakens also made appearances at this expo. Lines remained long as always, but Disney made sure that the wait for major programs in Hall D23 was set up with guests lining up in Hall E, which was a basement-like space where there was air conditioning and there was monitors set up displaying old Disney cartoons and features from the Disney Movies Anywhere app to just keep everyone who was waiting in line entertained and comfortable. Store Pass is also introduced, which was another Fast Pass-like system, this time specifically for access to the stores at the expo, which were also garnering very long lines at this point. 3-day weekend passes sell out prior to the con this year, signaling the continuously growing popularity of the expo, and Sorcerer Passes have now increased to $2,000. The con continues to massively increase in size each year, with more and more options of what to do, but they still seem a little unprepared to deal with the size increases that happen each year, with lines to get inside and lines to pick up store passes reportedly being numerous hours themselves, which kind of defeats the purpose of store pass despite Disney's best efforts. D23 Japan also occurs for the second time this year and is once again a success, and there are a huge number of attendees, with no one reporting it being crowded. The expo there centers on the theme, the power of the story. Destination D once again happens at Walt Disney World in 2016, this time at the Contemporary Resort. It was adventure themed, paying homage to Disney's True Life Adventures, and once again didn't have many large announcements, but did have exclusive looks at the upcoming Moana, the World of Pandora, and an exciting lineup of guests as always. The very first price increase for the Gold membership occurs in 2017, although only slightly. It increased from $74.99 to $79.99, and the price for the Gold Family membership jumps to $104.99. The expo was held in mid-July for the first and only time in its history, apparently to try to both rival San Diego Comic-Con, which is always held at the end of July, as well as to preemptively claim the hype of their own major announcements before SDCC. Seemingly, however, this doesn't work all that well as it reverts back to its usual August scheduling in 2019, and no other July expos have happened since. In 2017, I found the first report on free character coffees being given, which I think is wonderful, and I really hope it's still available. I haven't heard anything, so I'm scared, but I really hope it's still available. People report very positively about the content shown at panels, and there seems to be a very wide range of panels and things to watch throughout the convention that isn't just the major showcases. There are still a lot of comments about long lines. Disney in Your Day tells a story of how the lines for the animation panel specifically were handled, with a bit of disorganization, meaning that people who arrived hours after others in line were let in first. Disney did offer these people wristbands for priority seating at either the parks or live action panels, which does not make it okay, but it is very nice that they tried to rectify their mistake. There were more than 161 things going on at the 2017 Expo, so the size continues to grow, and it was also the year with the Tango de series panel. I love Tango de series. A huge number of actors from Infinity War appear at this Expo, as well as a bunch of actors from The Last Jedi. Marvel and Star Wars are now fully incorporated into the D23 culture and lineup, cementing D23 as a must-attend con for a huge new audience. Like, if you're a nerd, D23 is for you now. Tickets have continued to increase in price, with a 3-day member pass now going up to $207 or $238 for non-members, and the Sorcerer Pass increasing again to $2,250. Saturday only tickets, Friday only tickets, and 3-day weekend passes all sold out ahead of time, although it took almost a year for them to sell out before the con. Destination D is once again held at Walt Disney World in 2018, this time focusing on celebrating Mickey Mouse as the year marked his and Minnie's 90th birthday. And despite still being a single ballroom event, 2018 marks a significant shift for Destination D. Though prior years were more focused on retrospective, history-oriented content catered towards Disney history geeks, from this year onwards the event becomes something more of an off-year D23, using the event to launch major announcements for the brand. The most notable recorded announcement is that of both Galaxy's Edge rides getting their official names, as well as images for the upcoming immersive Star Wars hotel, which is sure to be budget-friendly and a huge success. Rest in peace, so I really wish I could have visited it. The third D23 Japan event also happens this year. There is a slightly larger price jump in memberships in 2019. Gold memberships are now $99.99 annually, and family memberships are now $129.99. Previously, renewing memberships offered slight discounts as well, and that was discontinued in 2019. 2019 appears to be the Expo's first attempt at a panel reservation system, using a virtual queue similar to online concert ticketing systems, but just like for the Eras Tour, this still led to a lot of waiting and ultimately disappointment for most participants. According to a post by Mastertainment, those who were early in the virtual queue were not limited to one pass, so all available reservations were quickly hoarded, leaving the majority of people in later queue positions with literally nothing to reserve for. Standby lines for panels and showcases reportedly have fans camping overnight to secure a spot. Disney's official entrance into the streaming wars is felt this year, with Disney Plus being a huge focus of the Expo. The event is strategically used to garner hype for the new platform, as it launches less than 3 months after this Expo, with early sign-up for accounts available. Apparently, the Expo attendees were offered a 3-year subscription for the cost of 2 years, which seems like a hell of a commitment for a streaming service, but if you're interested enough in the content, it is a pretty good saving. So the massive Epcot overhaul was a major focus of the parks panel, with Imagineering's eyes being a little bit bigger than their stomachs, as a lot of the announced projects never ended up happening. But, I can still believe. We also see the first appearance of properties from 20th Century Fox this year, following Disney's acquisition of the media company, finalizing earlier that year in March. This is largely exhibited at the Expo through the inclusion of Fox's massive library of properties on Disney Plus, prominently The Simpsons, National Geographic, and James Cameron's Avatar, the latter of which allowed the company to fully embrace the IP as their own after having licensed the rights to build a land based around that franchise that opened at Animal Kingdom in 2017. Despite the acquisition granting Disney full ownership over the X-Men and Fantastic Four characters that were previously owned by 20th Century Fox, these properties were noticeably absent at the convention. In 2020, there was originally a Destination D event at Walt Disney World scheduled for November that was subtitled Fantastic Worlds and themed to various magical worlds that lived under the Disney umbrella, but due to the pandemic, it was of course delayed until an indefinite time in 2021. D23 had been running events for, or giving special promotions for Disney events to members since early in their development, but they changed their schedule to consist of virtual events and Zoom celebrations during the lockdown. The most prominent of these online events was a 5-day online event now titled D23 Fantastic World Celebration, with each of the given 5 days containing a number of public virtual panels that were available to all general Disney fans, as well as some exclusive gold member-only type events. In 2021, Disney got rid of the family membership and introduced an alternative, the Gold Duo plan. The Gold Duo plan was one membership that had 2 members, the main member and the affiliate member. The affiliate had all the perks of the membership except the magazine subscription and member gift, and this retailed for $129 $29.99. Also in 2021, Destination D was officially renamed to Destination D23, and they successfully held a 2-day in-person event in November, subtitled A Fantastic Disney Celebration. This seemed to have included a lot of exclusive sneak peeks at new developments in the parks, especially, which makes sense considering it had been numerous years since the last D23 Expo. And notably, a new sneak peek of the previously announced Galactic Star Cruiser Hotel is shown. 2022 is the first year that the Expo was held in September since 2009, probably due to pandemic delays, and also apparently to kick off the Disney 100 celebration, despite the official celebration not kicking off until 3 months later on December 31st, but sure. For the first time since the Expo's founding, tickets to the event are restricted to active D23 members only, although free general membership still allowed you access to purchase tickets. This was the year that the reservation random selection process was introduced for panel reservations, seemingly to discourage the overnight queuing that was becoming a growing problem in previous years. The RSV system clearly doesn't guarantee you a seat in any of the panels you prioritize, and with many reports of people getting none of their selections, though many also report being given a random reservation for less popular panels that they didn't actually have any interest in. Despite it not working for everyone, it still seems to be a far fairer system than what was introduced in 2019, and I'd like to give genuine kudos to Disney again for consistently trying new ways to solve crowd control issues. This also seems to be the first appearance of the virtual queue and mobile checkout for the stores at the Expo, mimicking the smartphone-based phone system that their parks introduced in late 2019 to handle the massive crowds that were there for Rise of the Resistance and Galaxy's Edge. Early iterations of the system were reportedly very glitchy and often crashed, leaving those who couldn't snag a store reservation to wait in the now much reduced capacity standby lines. And despite banning overnight camping specifically, there are reports of substantial lines to enter the Expo by 4 a.m. DarlingDreamCo.com reports that lines to see exhibits or enter shops weren't too long though, which is a nice change and the first time I've read that sentence. In 2023, Destination D23 occurs at Walt Disney World again, with the theme being a celebration of Disney parks, experiences, and products to tie into Disney 100, the company's 100th anniversary. The Expo focuses obviously on the parks, with significant announcements for them. There were looks at the new animatronics for Tiana's Bayou Adventure, updates on the Epcot overhauls, a name reveal for the new Epcot nighttime show, the Zootopia Better Together re-theme of the Tree of Life, and more as well. In 2024, the name officially changes to D23, the ultimate Disney fan event, dropping Expo completely from its name. Just D23. It's cleaner. 2024 introduces the use of the Honda Center as well to host the headline showcases at night, which frees up lots of space at the convention center, but simultaneously adds another layer of exclusivity to the event, as well as a potential additional cost in order to see experiences that used to be included in the base ticket price if you were lucky or dedicated enough. Apparently, the use of the Honda Center freeing up space in the Anaheim Convention Center means that there's more space available, which helps a lot with crowd control. The Expo leaned heavily into the grandiose of the major announcements, establishing what was presumably a new standard for the Expo fan event. It's interesting that Disney and D23 as a company seem to consistently place an internal pressure on themselves to one-up each and every event. Every event has to be the biggest, the best they've ever had. And the pressure doesn't seemingly seem to be coming from fans who will accept crumbs of park updates and concept art for future projects. Nevertheless, there's sneak peeks for everything releasing in the near future, as well as announcements for huge properties like Frozen 3. The use of the Honda Center for the showcases seems to be very successful, with the only common complaints being that waiting for a bus back to the convention center after the showcase sometimes resulted in waits of up to an hour. But to be blunt, I'm not sure how that can be helped. And if you've ever been to Walt Disney World, waiting for a bus at the end of the night is just kind of part of the Disney experience. So part of the Disney Experiences showcase this year was live streamed in-game on Fortnite. Woo! D23 Brazil also takes place this year, marking the first and so far only time the event has been hosted in South America, and attendees who have been to numerous expos in the past said there was a significant upgrade in crowd control at the Brazil Expo. Yay! In 2025, a huge change for D23, the fan club, occurs. Disney announces that a D23 membership will no longer include a print copy of Disney 23, the quarterly magazine, and instead will now only include a digital copy, with print copies only available as individual full price purchases from the Disney Store. The Gold Duo membership is also retired, and instead different tiers of the Gold membership are now introduced. There's now a Gold Essential plan for $49.99, a Gold Choice plan for $99.99, and a Gold Complete plan that is $299.99. Destination D this year is themed to a journey around the worlds of Disney and is held in the Coronado Springs Resort rather than the Contemporary, which means a larger auditorium that could now hold roughly double the capacity. This specific Destination D event seemed to have a lot of announcements on the international parks as opposed to focusing on the US locations, which makes sense given the theme, but I find it refreshing. And as of 2026, Disney 23 is no more. The magazine is officially retired. The final ever issue was December of 2025, truly marking this a new era for D23 as a community. The 2026 Expo is set to take place in a few weeks as of time of writing and filming, so it's hard to know if there will be any big changes to note yet. I can attest, however, that access to Expo tickets has become even more restricted, now requiring a paid gold membership, $50 USD a year, for first access, or a complimentary gold membership for Disney Plus members, who were given access to purchasing tickets 2 hours after paid members. Charter members who have kept an active membership since 2009 were given a 48-hour pre-sale period. My partner and I were up at 4 a.m. Melbourne time to get in the queue for tickets and still had, I kid you not, 50,000 people ahead of us in line. Thank God for our friend Tony, who was given an earlier place in the queue and was kind enough to grab Honda Center tickets for us. Also this year is the first ever Disney Experiences auction, an official corporate partnership between Disney and Heritage Auctions, marking the first time Disney has formally orchestrated its own direct liquidation of authenticated theme park artifacts. This year also marks the first time a celebrity is hosting the Disney Experiences showcase, with Neil Patrick Harris taking on the role rather than the typical head of parks division. This is seemingly because the move to the Honda Center in 2024 required the presentation to move to more of a spectacle kind of feel. With all that being said, we have now made it to the present day, and the 2026 convention is fast approaching, with reservation system preferences already in, and surprise, I told you already, but I will be attending. Kind of as a grand finale to this topic, I will be uploading a vlog from the convention itself afterwards, chronicling any significant changes and reviewing the convention experiences as a first timer and as someone who has followed the expo in previous years. If you're a Disney person, if you're interested and you would like to see that, keep an eye out for that video when it comes out. If you would like to follow me on any social media, it'll all be linked below. I want to give a special shout out to my patrons who technically produced this video. I love you guys. I love you. Thank you for watching, and I will see you very soon. After D23.